30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Oh, baby. What is happening, Bills Mafia? It's Wednesday night, and that can only mean one thing. It's the mother effing smoke break live on the Buffalo Fanatics YouTube channel, and it's the first time that I'm joining you live on the smoke break, fresh off a Buffalo Bills W. And it feels great to have you in. Thanks so much for joining on a Wednesday night off a game that was dominant. It was weird. I don't know how you could possibly categorize what Sunday's victory for the Buffalo Bills was over the Miami Dolphins, but nonetheless, it was a W, and the Bills moved to 1-1, sole place of first place in the AFC East. Let's jump right into it because there is a lot to discuss in regard to the Bills' first victory here in the 2021 season. The Buffalo Bills win 35-0 in a game that was beyond frustrating, especially when you look at the score. If you did not watch the game and you simply saw the final score, you would have thought the Bills had absolutely dominated on both ends of the ball against the Miami Dolphins. That was not the case. It was a game that I felt throughout its entirety of. I sat back and continued to say to myself, this is the weirdest game I have ever watched. It's 14-0 at half, and I tweeted this out, and I still feel this way 3-4 days removed. I was incredibly frustrated with the Buffalo Bills, despite being up 14-0 at half, with Miami showing zero signs of being able to compete in that ballgame. This is the exact same way that I felt just a week prior against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Bills were up 10-0. Week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh did not show any signs of belonging in that game with the Bills whatsoever. And in the second half, they still, to me, did not seem like they matched up well with the Bills, especially on offense. Yet the Bills found a way to choke it away. And that was the complete opposite of what happened on Sunday against the Dolphins. The Bills wound up putting their foot on the gas, especially on defense. But there were similarities between both games that are awfully concerning. There's also things that are very, very exciting from both games. So we'll touch on all of that as we get into the game here. But let's start with the game in its entirety. And right off the bat, the Bills showed their presence and their dominance straight out of the chutes. The Bills could not have started the game any better. The Miami Dolphins could not have started the game any worse. The Miami Dolphins start with the ball, and from there, it was immediately evident that the Bills defense was going to have a field day, and it never ended. That was a field day that lasted 4 hours, and it was incredibly fun to watch. Out of everything from that game, the one thing you took away, it was this Bills defense is for real. Week 1, I don't know if we could tell if the Bills defense had played great or if the Steelers offense was just that bad. I felt that it was a mix of both. If you watched the Steelers against the Raiders this past weekend, you realize how truly bad the Pittsburgh Steelers are on offense. It also made you feel probably twice as worse about the loss against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know that was the feeling I had. Pittsburgh is not good. They might be a fringe playoff team come the end of the year, especially with the division that they are in. And as I see here, King Thriller, congrats to Las Vegas. Tip of the cap, Las Vegas Raiders right now currently 2-0 in first place of the AFC with 2 massive wins. They come out the chutes beating Baltimore, who just beat the Kansas City Chiefs, And they now beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, of course, beat the Bills in week 1. So they now have victories over 2 teams in which defeated the prior AFC championship representatives. That is a very good start for the Las Vegas Raiders, a team that has never seemed to be able to quite get things going. We will obviously tell throughout the season if they are for real, but I can't find a better team right now who's had a better start than the Las Vegas Raiders. But the point I'm making here is, of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers offense is abysmal. It is brutal. And despite how good their defense is, they are going to have to win games the exact same way they won them against the Bills. And that, of course, is dominant defense. The ball rolls your way. You get the luck on your side the majority of the game. That's what happened against Buffalo. Not so much against the Las Vegas Raiders. Resulted in a loss. Very similar game. Now let's flip over to the Bills. Very similar game to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the first half, except it seemed the Bills had a bit more competency on offense. Maybe you can chalk that up to the fact that the Miami Dolphins defense is good, but it's not Pittsburgh Steelers good. But right out of the gates, the Bills defensive line is showing you what it is made of. And what it is made of is incredibly young talent who seems to be rising to the top just as we hoped it would. Brandon Beane's biggest addressment in the offseason, especially through the draft, was the defensive line. I've beat this dead horse a million times. The reason the Bills were unable to compete with the Kansas City Chiefs a season ago was because of their lack of a defensive line pressure. We have seen through 2 weeks that that is no longer the case, especially against the Miami Dolphins. I have not seen a dominant performance out of a defense like that, especially in Buffalo, in quite some time. It felt like we were watching vintage Sean McDermott defense from a few years back. The best part about it is this defense, especially up front, is incredibly young. And it's not only the defensive line. Matt Milano, currently right now, PFF highest graded linebacker in the league. Teron Johnson is looking like a Pro Bowler 2 games in. Who would have thought? Tre'Davious White, always going up against the best receiver on the opposite side of the ball, is holding his ground like we always expect him to. And the secondary for the Bills continues to prove to us why they're one of the best in the league. But it's the front line that stands out for the Buffalo Bills defense extraordinarily, mainly due to the fact that last year it was non-existent. And get it, I get it. You know, the Miami Dolphins offense, it's not a world beater by any means, but the Bills did not show a presence like they did on Sunday once last year on the defensive side of the ball. They absolutely dominated from snap 1 to the final snap in the fourth quarter. And that defensive line pressure was as impressive as I have seen in a very long time. Straight out of the gate, the Bills defense was doing whatever they wanted to the Miami Dolphins offensive line. It was almost embarrassing. The first 2 plays, the edge pressure got in there so quickly and untouched. You were almost wondering if the Miami Dolphins game plan was simply to not block on the edge. I've never seen anything quite like it, and it was not addressed. And it was so bad that it wound up resulting in Tua Tagovailoa being carted off the field. That's how bad the offensive line play was for the Miami Dolphins. They essentially put their quarterback out there to get injured. I mean, it wasn't even a surprise. Straight out of the gate, you looked at yourself and said, man, if this continues, how is Tua going to be able to stand up? I tweeted out, Tua Tagovailoa's jersey is going to be a dark green by the end of this game. I tweeted that out 2 minutes in. And the following series, the poor guy's carted off simply due to the fact that his offensive line could not give him a lick of protection. Now, you can narrow that down to 1, very bad offensive line play by the Miami Dolphins. Let's not get it twisted. But 2, I don't care who you are. A defense doesn't have that kind of day unless they are a stout defense. And the Bills, the first 2 weeks in, are looking leaps and bounds better than the defense that we saw out of Buffalo a season ago. And that, to me, is the most promising and encouraging thing we can take away from the Buffalo Bills early on in this season. The problem is the offense and the defense are not colliding to have a complete game. We have seen now 2 straight weeks where the defense comes to play, the offense does not. And you say to yourself, well, wait a minute, Z-Bop. It was 35-0. How the hell can you tell me the Bills offense didn't come to play? I know, shocking. But of course you watch the game, and of course you hear me say this, and you're not going to argue against it because they simply did not look like the Bills offense of old. And it makes you wonder if the Bills offense of a season ago can find a way to rear its head again. This Bills team is exactly who we thought they were going to be, if not better. If you're going to get defensive play like we just got from the Bills on Sunday, and you mix that together with the Bills offense that we saw last season, look out. That is the Super Bowl contending team that we all came into the season expecting to see. But through 2 weeks, Josh Allen is not looking like the guy he was less than a year ago. It's inevitable. Let's face it, and you cannot argue against it. Josh Allen, 2 straight weeks now, has not looked like the second highest paid quarterback in the NFL that he now currently is. There's several different things that you can look at here. The one thing I won't look at is a massive sign of regression. Give me a break. That is not the argument here. We're 2 weeks in. That is not the narrative. You cannot possibly tell me that 2 weeks through a season against 2 very good defenses, let's not get it twisted, against 2 very good defenses, you cannot tell me that Josh Allen has regressed. But there's definitely something up. What that is, I'm not entirely sure. Josh Allen does not look comfortable out there on the offense in this current moment in time. And I think anybody with eyeballs who's watched the Bills the last 2 weeks, after watching them the entire season last year, would be in agreement. Now, there's flashes of brilliance like we saw on Sunday. The deep ball to Emmanuel Sanders, an absolute dime. That sets the Bills up for their second touchdown. That second touchdown was one of those type of touchdowns that only a handful of guys in the league could make. Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, maybe 1 or 2 others. Russell Wilson. Josh Allen buys as much time as he possibly can right near the goal line, drifts right, probably buys himself a full 5-6 seconds before getting nailed, throws off his back foot, off his opposite side of his body, buys enough time for Stephon Diggs to get wide open, boom, touchdown. But outside of those 2 plays, really, Josh Allen struggled tremendously against the Miami Dolphins. And it's such a weird thing to think about after that game because the Bills destroyed the Miami Dolphins. And you wonder if Josh Allen had played against the Dolphins like he did in week 2 last season, which was probably his best game of his career, what was that score? Who the hell knows? That might have been an NFL record the way things were going. The Bills could have put a 60 spot up if Josh Allen had a vintage Josh Allen game. The issue I have here through 2 weeks is that we do now know that Josh Allen has some sort of struggle, whether it's mental or his game in general. We just don't know exactly what it is, but he is not hitting balls that he has typically hit throughout the season a year ago. Even the deep ball to Stephon Diggs, a you got mossed vintage moment. It was very short. Against Xavier Howard, Stephon Diggs made one of the plays of the week. It was a short ball. A week ago, we see a elongated ball to Emmanuel Sanders, flat out missed him. That would have changed the game. We saw another ball that Josh Allen missed going towards Emmanuel Sanders on an out route towards the sidelines in this game. Wasn't under enough pressure to where I thought it altered the throw, and it was completely off target. We're also noticing that the short game for Josh Allen isn't necessarily on target as well. There's just little things that have been stacking up to where you watch Josh Allen, and then you watch Patrick Mahomes, despite a loss against the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday night, and you're noticing that there's a clear difference. There's a clear difference. Patrick Mahomes, right out of the gates, has shown that he is calm, cool, collected, and has a composure about him that I don't think anybody else in the league truly has. It's just a swagger and a type mentality that I don't really know if you could define. It's just palpable when you watch the game. And Josh Allen had a lot of that presence last year, but through 2 weeks, we are not seeing that. Now, I think this week it got a bit better, of course. Against the Pittsburgh Steelers, it was just abysmal. And Josh Allen wasn't asked to do nearly as much against the Miami Dolphins as he was against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that's kudos to the Bills' run game, really having a presence in this one right off the gate. I mean, Devin Singletary, that was the longest run for a Bills running back that I think I can remember in a very, very long time. In the start of the game, I mean, that was that right there. The game could have been over. The Bills force a 3 and out. They hit Tua Tagovailoa on almost every snap of the series, and the Bills come out and within 2 plays, they're in the end zone. But this game entirely comes down to what the defense showed, and that was utter dominance. And they did it when it counted. The Miami Dolphins went for it on 4th down almost every other series, it seemed, and it was 4th and short, and the Bills didn't give up an inch. And when the Bills allowed the Miami Dolphins down the field, they were forcing turnovers, or they were flat out stopping them on 4th down and getting a turnover on downs. But I mean, I can't think of a better game from a defensive side of the ball than what we just witnessed against the Miami Dolphins. And if that continues to be consistent, look out. But we have to see the Josh Allen that we saw a year ago in order for us to legitimately claim these Buffalo Bills as the Super Bowl contenders that we thought they were going to be coming into this season. The nice thing is you look across the AFC landscape and things are very, very tight. Every single AFC playoff team from a year ago, all 7 of them are now either 1-1 or 0-2. 0-2 being the Indianapolis Colts, who the Bills beat in the wild card. Every single AFC playoff team now has at least one loss, and everybody has shown vulnerabilities. The difference, though, however, is you look at the loss for the Kansas City Chiefs, and it's by 1 point to a contender in the Baltimore Ravens that came all the way down to the wire. And then, unfortunately, for the Chiefs, wound up being lost because of a fumble. That, to me, that type of loss is much different than the way the Bills lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that loss, it just seems worse a week removed, doesn't it? Because you see what the Bills do to the Miami Dolphins, and you see what the Raiders were able to accomplish against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it just makes you think to yourself, man, that game should have been won. And that's the narrative I had last week. That game was more than winnable, and it should have been won. And I think if the Bills play that game against the Steelers 10 times, they win at least 9 of them. Unfortunately, the one time they lose is the one time they squared off in week 1. The Bills right now, in my opinion, should be 2-0, and they have not looked nearly as good as they did a season ago. That of course, is removing the defense. The defense, I just don't know what else to say. I mean, I could sit here and talk about the defense all show here. Just a truly remarkable performance, and it was against 2 quarterbacks. And I think anytime you have a backup quarterback come in, it changes things. And I personally, let's face it, Jacoby Brissett should be starting over Tua Tagovailoa. Jacoby Brissett looked much better in the pocket against the Bills than Tua Tagovailoa did in his short period of time there. He looked better than Tua did against the New England Patriots a week ago. And I understand from the Dolphins' perspective, you want to start the guy that you drafted in the first round. You don't want your backup playing, and that adds more questions than it gives answers. I get that. I mean, you know, look at the situation in Dallas. Tony Pollard's a better running back in this current moment than Ezekiel Elliott. But unfortunately for the Dallas Cowboys, he's a high draft pick. He's way overpaid. It looks weird if you don't start and play him. Jacoby Brissett is the better quarterback. The one thing that we can take away from this weekend, though, is the Bills. I mean, the Bills could wind up having a completely off year. Josh Allen could never get it going, and they're going to win this division. I mean, that is the inevitability that has become relevant within 2 weeks here. This division is the Bills, and it might as well be handed to them at this moment. And I'll put that in words, in a statement right now that I will not back out on the rest of the season. This division, it would take a catastrophic collapse from the Buffalo Bills to not win this division this year. The Jets look worse than they did last year, if you even thought that was possible. And I can't through 2 weeks claim that it's all Zach Wilson's fault, but he just looks terrible. And I mean, does he really have a fighting chance? The Jets have one of the worst rosters in the league. The Jets look abysmal. And we just watched a Miami Dolphins team edge out a win against the New England Patriots a week ago. And the Bills come in, they don't play nearly up to their potential, and they win 35-0, their biggest margin of victory in over 25 years. And that right there is a telltale sign of a contender. The Bills did not look like themselves on Sunday whatsoever, and they wound up having one of their most dominant victories in over 2.5 decades. And that right there proves to you that when you are a team who is touted to be a Super Bowl contender, no matter what the circumstances are come Sunday or whatever night you're playing, you wind up getting the job done and proving that you are the superior team. And the Bills did just that against the Miami Dolphins, despite not looking like we know that they can look. And that, to me, is why this game was so incredibly weird. Because even when the game was 35-0 and it comes to its conclusion, you sat back in your couch or your chair, or whether you were at the game all the way out in Miami, you sat back and you were like, man, nothing about that game on offense felt like 35-0. I mean, the Bills offense did not seem like they put up 35 points. they had a couple decent drives, but 14 of their points came off of home run hits. The rest of the game was the Bills were not doing a very good job of moving the ball. And the first 2 drives resulted in touchdowns. They were both home run hits. Devin Singletary with nearly a 50-yard touchdown rush, and then Josh Allen deep ball to Sanders, and they punched the ball in at the 5-yard line. After that, the Bills couldn't do absolutely anything on offense the rest of the first half. And then out of the gates from halftime, they had probably their best drive of the game. That resulted in a touchdown. And, from there, just nothing about it ever felt like dominance from the Bills offense. It just came down to the fact that no matter what Miami did on their offense, the Bills defense had an answer, whether they went all the way down the field or whether they stopped them at the midfield line. The Bills were either forcing a turnover on downs, or just flat out disrupting anything that the Miami Dolphins did. And it all comes down to the pressure. The pressure the Bills D put on both Tua in his very short-lived couple of series in the game and Jacoby Brissett was just beyond impressive. And I think that's something that we were dying to see come from the Bills this season. And sure enough, through 2 weeks, we are seeing that, and never more evident than what we saw on Sunday. The pressure was just lights out. I mean, it felt like you were watching the Steel Curtain or the 85 Bears. I mean, let's not get ahead of ourselves here, but that's really what it felt like every single time the Miami Dolphins snapped the ball. The Bills were on the quarterback like white on rice. It was fun to watch. And I can't remember the last time it was fun to watch the defense for this Buffalo Bills. The issue, though, is it's usually us enjoying the entertainment from the offense. The 2 weeks that we have now watched the Bills, it has not been fun to watch on offense. It's been rather stagnant and boring. I mean, there's been a few flashes that get you excited, but it's nothing like what we witnessed a season ago, where the offense has you excited from first snap to final snap. And look, it's 2 weeks in, and we have now seen all AFC contenders, for the most part, drop a game. So, I mean, that right there there's your silver lining, right? Every team that is considered to be an AFC contender in 2021 has found a way to slip up. The nice thing here is that you see the Bills slip up week 1, and you can tell yourself they really should have won the game. There's other teams who really, they don't have the pleasure of saying that. And that to me means something, because Pittsburgh's D is probably the best the Bills are going to face, and they had that game won all the way through the midway point of the fourth quarter. The Bills really wish they could have that one back. But you're now 2 weeks in, and you're left wondering, well, what is going on with Josh Allen, and is it correctable? And if it is, when is it going to be corrected? The Bills have 2 opportunities over the next 2 weeks to get it in gear before it really, really is going to matter. And that, of course, is 3 weeks from now, when the Bills face off against the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead on Sunday Night Football. The Bills have 2 games that are going to be incredibly winnable over the next 2 weeks. They are almost 10-point favorites at home this coming Sunday against the Washington football team. Now, the Washington football team is no team to sleep on. Taylor Heineke is not a joke. I think we all watched that Thursday night game against the New York Giants. It was a complete cluster F, but at the same time, maybe one of the most entertaining games, if not the most entertaining game of the entire weekend. And Taylor Heineke, for a quarterback who was making his 3rd start in that game, looked like he is deserving of being a starting quarterback. He looked good. He looked better than Daniel Jones. Who Giants seem to have the utmost faith in. I don't know why, but they do. Taylor Heineke is no joke, and he is a better quarterback at this given moment than Ben Roethlisberger is. Let's face it. Ben Roethlisberger, 2 weeks in, should not be in the NFL right now. It's inevitable. Ben Roethlisberger's time as a starting NFL quarterback is done. It should have been done prior to the season. Now, is that incredibly weird to hear? Taylor Heineke better than Ben Roethlisberger? I mean, of course it is. But right now, who are you going to take? The young guy who's slinging the ball over the field, or a guy in Ben Roethlisberger who can barely throw it 5 yards? We're going to get a lot more deep balls and electrifying plays and chances out of Taylor Heineke against the Bills this week than we saw in the entirety of the week 1 game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Those are facts. Now, sometimes that'll result in turnovers. Other times it'll result in touchdowns. Taylor Heineke was slinging that ball all over the field against a decent Giants D, and he had a couple of incredible balls against those Giants, and they wound up winning the game. Now, the Washington defense is supposed to be one of the best in the league. They have not looked like it through 2 weeks. So now you have two units in the Bills offense and the Washington defense that were supposed to be superior to the competition coming into the season. And through 2 weeks, neither unit has really showed that they are exactly that. You have two units who want to come out and desperately prove that. And those two units just so happen to be butting heads in week 3. I look at that Vegas line. I look at Washington as a 10-point underdog. I think that is incredibly high. The Bills right now, I'm not entirely sure if they're deserving of being a 10-point favorite against Washington. We shall see. But I think Washington right now is a better football team than the Miami Dolphins. Miami looked like a JV team on Sunday. I mean, let's be real. And it's hilarious to me that everybody wants to claim that the Miami Dolphins are the team that has the best chance of giving the Bills a run at first place in the division. The Buffalo Bills have owned and dominated the Miami Dolphins for the last 3 years. It's not even close. I mean, it's not even close. The Bills had an off day on Sunday, and that game was over after the first series. They could have taken a knee the rest of the game, and the way things were played out on defense by the Bills, the game was over. That was an utterly embarrassing loss for the Miami Dolphins. And I think that's one that you're going to be tough. That's going to be tough to come back on. Why coming in? Bills favored by 7.5 in Vegas. Okay, why? Thanks for the update. That must have shifted. But what does that tell you? Because the Bills opened up at 9.5 on Monday. So that means a lot of money is coming in on the Washington football team. When you see lines shift down, if you're not huge into betting, when lines shift down, that means a lot of money was put on one team. Vegas has to find a way to offset the bets, so they lower the odds. So thank you, Y, for the update. Looks like the Bills are favored 7.5 against Washington now. But even so, in the NFL, a touchdown favorite or more is a massive line. That's a massive line. If you're winning by more than a touchdown, that usually means you had a pretty good day. But opening up, the Bills were considered to be nearly 2 scores of a favorite against the Washington football team. Now, look, I don't look at Washington as a snoozer at all. Dallas looks good. Dallas looks very good on offense, at least. And they had a great win over the weekend. They probably could have won against Tampa Bay in week 1. But I would probably give Washington the edge right now as far as if those two teams are going to face off. I think I might put my money on Washington. But either way, those two teams clearly are the best two in the NFC East. But we got to remember, despite the issues that Washington has shown throughout the last several seasons, they were a playoff team a season ago. And Taylor Heineke, he's going to come out and play each and every game like it's his last, because it very well could be. This is a guy who didn't even think he was going to make his way to the NFL, and here he is starting for Washington now that Ryan Fitzpatrick is down. That's another whole storyline in itself. We had 2 games set over the next 2 weeks where the Bills were supposed to square off against 2 of their former quarterbacks. They will square off against 0. Ryan Fitzpatrick and Tyrod Taylor both injured, and both will not play against the Bills, which I think is upsetting, because I think everybody was excited, of course, to have Fitz back. Everybody always is. And Tyrod, I think that would have been great too. I mean, I was always Tyrod's biggest supporter. I was looking forward to seeing him, especially because, look, through 2 weeks before he got injured, Tyrod was slinging the ball around. I mean, the Houston Texans were right there against the Cleveland Browns on Sunday until Tyrod went down. They gave Cleveland everything they could give them. And in week 1, a team that I think most people thought was the worst team in the league, if not one of them, had a field day. Week 1, the Houston Texans did. So Tyrod Taylor will not start against the Bills in 2 weeks from now. And of course, Taylor Heineke will get the start this coming week as Ryan Fitzpatrick is injured. So let's get back to the Miami Dolphins game here. But before we do, always a great time to tell you about our friends over at Manscaped. You hear me talk about them every week, and that's because they are the leader in men's grooming products. And if you haven't, head over to their website yet and take advantage of the promo code Fanatics to get a special discount on their products. What are you waiting for? I know plenty of you have taken advantage of that deal. Continue to do so. And if you haven't, make sure to make your way over there, manscaped.com. Use the promo code Fanatics for a special discount off your entire order. And that, of course, includes the Lawnmower 4.0. It is the best men's grooming product on the market right now. It's got that awesome built-in LED light, wireless charging, the ability to travel with it with its unique travel lock. The thing is a beast. I use it. I know many of you do use it as well. And if you are not currently using it, make sure to get on it by heading over to manscaped.com, promo code Fanatics. Throw all of their items in the cart and take advantage of that special discount. So let's loop back here to the Miami Dolphins game. And, overall, give me your comments, in the comment section below. How did everybody feel about this one as the game went along? Because as you continue to watch the game, especially in the first half, the thing that was most concerning to me is it had seemed like the week 1 game against the Pittsburgh Steelers was not a outlier. The way that the Bills played against Pittsburgh seemed to trickle back into week 2 against the Miami Dolphins. And it's an odd scenario to be in, because right now the Bills being 1-1 after a massive margin victory, we do not know who this team currently is. And that is very odd, because you have your entire roster set in place to where you want it to be. The Bills have one of the best wide receiver cores in the entire league. You have an MVP caliber quarterback in Josh Allen, who is now the second highest paid quarterback in the league. You see a great running attack last week in Devin Singletary, and Zach Moss, who I know only had 26 carries, did have 2 touchdowns, and those 2 touchdowns were beastly. Zach Moss, tip of the cap to you, sir. That man runs like a human wrecking ball. I would not want to be in front of him trying to make a tackle. He does not go down. So a solid running effort against the Miami Dolphins this past week. And that, of course, resulted in Josh Allen not having to throw the ball nearly as much as he did against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He threw it nearly 20 times less. There was also far less designed runs. Thank you, Brian Dable. Hopefully that narrative of Josh Allen being the lead rusher has kind of hit the back burner, because we know for a fact that is not the type of game that we want to see from Josh Allen on a week in, week out basis. So that went away a little bit this past week. And I think that comes down to the fact that the Bills had a pretty decent game in the run department. But right now you sit here going into Washington and you wonder what the Bills will prove to us over the next 2 weeks. I said last week, the disadvantage that the Bills are currently at with the schedule that is being placed in front of them is they really don't have an incredible opportunity to prove that they are the elite team that we thought they were last year and that we thought they'd be coming into this year, because you're playing 3 teams who the Bills are clearly better than. The Miami Dolphins, of course, let's face it. I mean, that wasn't squishing the fish. That was turning the fish into sushi. I mean, a whole all-you-can-eat sushi platter. That was on Sunday. And then you have the Washington football team, who, they squeak out a win in week 2. They did not look very good in week 1. And I don't know if their defense is capable of being what they were a season ago. And then you have the Houston Texans, who just it's all over the place. And now with Tyrod Taylor gone, is it Davis Mills starting now? I mean, it's a dumpster fire in Houston. So you now have 3 straight weeks where the Bills are not only favorited, but if they don't win, it's an utter shock. If they do win, it's status quo. I mean, even after a 35-0 win for the Bills, I don't think anybody expected anything much different. The Bills have completely destroyed the Miami Dolphins the last handful of times they've played them. It's not even close. The Bills are averaging well over 30 points against them. The margin of victory is disgusting. I mean, it's not even close. So, they prove that they're back to where they were as far as getting the job done against Miami in the fashion that they typically do. But what did we learn from Buffalo on Sunday? Other than their front line is incredible, at least so far. We have not learned anything in regard to the Bills being a Super Bowl team, and I doubt that this week or the week after, even if they win in the fashion that they did this past Sunday. But the nice thing about this slate is, look, you don't have to prove anything to anybody. It doesn't matter. Wins are wins, and that's that. Where you will have the ability to prove yourself is in 3 weeks from now against the Kansas City Chiefs. And look, it was an ugly game in the beginning for Lamar Jackson in the first half against the Kansas City Chiefs, but they got the job done, a job that the Bills have not been able to do, and frankly, not many other teams in the entire league have been able to do. That was an incredible signature win for Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson and the entirety of the Baltimore Ravens organization. A massive, massive win, especially coming off a game that they should have won against the Las Vegas Raiders. So you see that the capability of getting the job done against the Kansas City Chiefs is possible. I'm pretty sure that was Patrick Mahomes' first loss in September. That's the first time Patrick Mahomes has lost in September in his career as an NFL player. So a massive win for the Baltimore Ravens, and a shocking and an outlier of a loss for the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Bills are going to have to find a way to play them similar and get the job done in a similar fashion that the Baltimore Ravens did if they're going to want to solidify themselves back to the team that we thought they would be coming into the year. Now, I'm not saying you absolutely have to beat the Chiefs 3 weeks from now in order to prove that. I think if Baltimore would have lost on Sunday night this past week, we still would have got the impression that they're capable of playing right with the Chiefs, and they did. And if it didn't come down to that fumble, the Chiefs are going to win that game. If the Chiefs do not fumble on their final drive, Mahomes is getting you down in field goal position. You're going to win that game if you're the Chiefs. Ball bounced Baltimore's way. Sometimes that's the way it rolls. They get the victory. You now have 2 games in a row that I think are tune-up games. I'm not guaranteeing a victory, but it's about as close to a guarantee as you could probably have over the next 2 weeks. If the Bills don't get that done, obviously there's sign for concern, but I'm not worried about these 2 games because to me, these next 2 games are similar to the Miami game where the Bills are clear favorites. They're the clearly better team. The job should get done. If the Bills go out there and beat Washington and beat Houston the way that they just did against Miami or close to it, I will feel a lot better about the direction the team is heading in going into a game of the caliber in which the game is against the Kansas City Chiefs. But it's going to have to be like that. If the Bills edge out 2 close victories against Washington and Houston, what do we know about this team? I don't think we learn much about this Bills team until we get to that Kansas City team. And then of course that doesn't get much easier. I mean, I know that Tennessee got rolled week 1, but they were right there and probably could have beaten the Seahawks over the weekend. That game goes to overtime. They found a way to lose it. Or excuse me, am I wrong on that? Hold on a minute. I might be getting confused here. No, I'm sorry. The Titans won that game. There was so many great games over the weekend. Finally, on Sunday, there were great games. Week 1, I thought week 1 was rough as far as competition was concerned. Wow, there was great games all over the board this past weekend. But pardon me, the Titans won that game. So that was the point I was trying to get at. The Titans get rolled week 1, but they come out. Derrick Henry, good Lord. Barry Sanders 2.0 over the weekend. Goodness gracious. And Hoffins, yeah, I mean, no doubt the Titans D is not good. And that to me, of course, in a few weeks from now is a game where you should be able to see Josh Allen have a game that we know he's capable of. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but the point I'm making here is after these 2 games, Washington and Houston, which I view to be tune-ups, you then follow those 2 games with 2 opponents that were in the AFC playoffs a season ago, Kansas City Chiefs and Tennessee Titans, both games in primetime, which the Bills had a ton of success with last year. So not only are those games massive for AFC playoff implications, not only are they massive for proving where this team is as far as the hierarchy is concerned within the AFC, they're in the national spotlight. You now have 2 straight weeks where you're going to have the opportunity at home to get your team where it needs to be, especially on offense, and then carry that momentum in to 2 very tough AFC road games that are in prime time. So these next 2 weeks are crucial. Don't overlook either of them. And even if the Bills get the job done in the fashion they did this past weekend, that to me is a telltale sign of using those 2 games to prep for the following 2. I'm not overlooking them, but let's be real here. If the Bills find a way to slip up over the next 2 weeks, that is a massive concern. The Bills are a far better team than their next 2 opponents. I look at these 2 games as a very, very good opportunity, for lack of a better term, to get ready for two other games that are going to wind up being massive as far as the landscape is concerned for how the season plays out in the AFC as things come to a conclusion. So, that to me, to summarize the Dolphins game in a nutshell, you got two words: dominant and weird. Dominantly weird. I don't know what to make of that game. I mean, when's the last time you've watched a team win by the margin in which the Bills just won and you thought to yourself, man, they didn't look very good? Now, that's the luxury of being a Bills fan in 2021. I think any other year prior to the last 2 years, a win like this, I mean, good God, you'd be out partying in the streets, running around streaking. I mean, give me a break. I mean, that's the luxury that we now have as Bills fans in 2021, where a 35-point victory while simultaneously blanking the other team, an in-division rival, is meh. And that's a cool spot to be in, because that's exactly what this was. I don't think anybody's throwing a parade because the Bills won 35-0 against the Miami Dolphins. Nobody's over the moon about that. Obviously, you're stoked the Bills get to 1-1. They get their first win. They looked great on defense, but nobody's going nuts about that type of win against Miami. Nobody is. I think the majority of people going into that game expected to smack Miami, and why wouldn't you? The Bills have done it every other time they've played them over the last couple of seasons. That was expectation. So you have now 2 more weeks against two teams that I view are similar to Miami as far as skill set in comparison to the Bills to do exactly what you just did. But what we're looking for here is, can the Bills defense, especially on the front line, can they stay consistent with the performance that we just saw, or if not close? I mean, you're not going to get that every week. That was insane. What the Bills off the defensive line did on Sunday was ridiculous. You can't expect that every week. But if they can continue to get pressure like that, alter the game, alter the ability for what we will now see in 2 young quarterbacks in Taylor Heineke, and I think it's Davis Mills. Correct me if I'm wrong. If he's not going to start, I don't know who else is on Houston. I mean, name me 5 players on the Houston Texans right now. Good luck. I mean, that's just where that organization's at. I mean, you got an opportunity for this young and rising defense to really dominate again against 2 quarterbacks with little to no experience. But the true test will be against Taylor Heineke, because he has looked good in his starts. Let's be frank. I mean, even last year in the playoffs, his first start as an NFL quarterback was against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the wild card. We all know how their season wound up ending. Taylor Heineke and the Washington football team gave those Tampa Bay Bucs their best run for their money in the entirety of those playoffs. That is facts. The Washington football team with Taylor Heineke looked better against Tampa Bay than Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, than Kansas City and the Chiefs, and Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints. Those are facts. And he goes out and gets a win where I thought, other than the pick late, which, I mean, everybody's dogging Heineke for throwing that pick late in the game. That was a hell of a pick. That wasn't your routine, up for grabs pick. That was a terrible throw. I mean, that was a diving pick coming from the back end, a great play. Outside of that, man, Taylor Heineke looked pretty damn good on Thursday Night Football last week. So I'm not overlooking that dude in the slightest. And to me, it's a good opportunity to see if this Bills D can carry what they just did into a game where, I mean, let's be real. Taylor Heineke's got confidence right now. No doubt about it. Why wouldn't he? He's on cloud 9. I mean, we're talking about a guy who, most people don't even think belongs in the league, and he knows that. I mean, these guys aren't idiots. These guys know the narratives that surround them, of course. It's too noticeable now. You don't miss this stuff anymore with social media and the constant media surrounding every single thing that happens within every organization. These guys know what everybody thinks about him. And Taylor Heineke knows that people don't think he should be a starting quarterback in the league. Well, what he showed me last week, is he any worse than Daniel Jones? Is he any worse than an aging and borderline starter in Ben Roethlisberger? And I'll tell you this too. Is Taylor Heineke any worse than Tua Tagovailoa? Is Taylor Heineke any worse than Tua Tagovailoa? Could you prove it? Could you prove it? No, you couldn't. So, insanity to think about. But in week 3, is Taylor Heineke perhaps the best quarterback the Bills will face through 3 weeks? You could make the argument. Wild, but it's the truth. And you're going against a guy who's got the utmost confidence right now. He's coming off a victory that you could tell meant the world to the guy. I mean, imagine you're in that situation. You know, you barely make it into the NFL. You finally get your starting opportunity based on your veteran presence in the locker room getting injured, and you take full advantage of it in prime time against a division rival where, you know, whoever loses that game is in rough shape. You move to 0-2, and it's going to be tough to scale your way up in the division, especially the way the Cowboys offense has looked. So I'm not underestimating Washington at all. But at the same time, that is not me saying the Bills should not go out and dominate. They should. And we will learn a lot from the Bills defense, I believe, in this coming game. If I see what the Bills did against Miami this coming week, I'm a full-on, bought-in believer that this front line is making an argument to be one of the best in the league. I mean, good grief. And it's not just the front line. That's the extraordinary thing. I mean, you know, the ability to cover the wide receivers has been extraordinary thus far. Pittsburgh, you know, it was no highlight reel day for Pittsburgh on offense, of course. They had a couple of great plays. You know, Chase Claypool had an amazing catch that wound up hurting the Bills. But this past week, I mean, you know, it was Gesicki again who probably had the best day, and that just seems to be the status quo when the Bills play the Dolphins. Gesicki just seems to have a better day than he has against anybody else. Just seems to be the way it goes. It didn't matter. But the Bills secondary looks great. The Bills D-line, it looks even better. In the mid-tier game, I mean, Matt Milano right now, best linebacker in the league. I mean, Matt Milano, and thank God he's healthy because didn't it look like for a second he got banged up? The dude is all over the field. He's on the ball every snap, it seems. I can't get enough of Matt Milano. I mean, probably one of the most underrated players in the entire league. And right now, statistically speaking, according to PFF, he is the best linebacker in the league, and he's looking like it. I mean, that forced fumble down near the red zone, unbelievable play. And it's so weird. If you go back and watch that game, how in the hell did Miami not score? That was almost an impossible accomplishment by Miami to not score in that game. Like, that was almost an impossible feat. They got into scoring position numerous times. It was amazing that every time they lined up for 4th and short, they could not get it. They could not get it. That speaks highly to the Bills D-line. And when they did seem to make their way down there without having to go for it on 4th down, it was almost a turnover every time. Beyond impressed with the Bills defense. How could you not be? And then with the offense, like I said, I don't think anybody has the answer right now. And the other thing here is too, usually when you have criticism about Josh Allen, you wind up getting absolutely destroyed, especially if you put it out in public and not keep it to yourself. But I tweeted out on Sunday, and you know, if you follow me on Twitter during Bills games, I tweet probably 500 times within a 3-hour time span. But what was very telling to me is it's very easy to read the Bills Mafia room. You can tell where the vibe is because it's just usually noticeable online based on what the majority of people are saying. I tweeted out, outside of a few nice plays, Josh Allen does not look good. That made it the rounds around Twitter. It got like 500 likes. And what did that tell me? It told me it's for real, because usually when you say something like that on Twitter, you're going to get your head cut off from Bills Mafia. And I love that about our fan base. They will defend every player on this roster, especially Josh Allen, to the death. But there was no way anybody can make the defense against Josh Allen in the way he's been playing over this last 2 weeks. So that tells everybody within the Bills Mafia fan base is in agreement right now that Josh Allen is just off. And I don't know if anybody knows quite what it is. But the nice thing here is, he's not making brutal decisions. The balls are off, but they're not terrible decisions. And he's not playing hero ball either, which was obviously one of his biggest flaws when he first started out as the starter for the Bills. He's just off. I think the best way to put it is he's just off. The balls aren't nearly as crisp. They're not nearly as on target. And I think that there's a variety of factors that can weigh into what's going on with him right now. Is the pressure of the contract at him a little bit? It might be. I mean, being the second highest paid quarterback in the league has to be a bit nerve-wracking. I mean, the pressure is on. When you're fighting for a contract, it's all on you. And I mean, obviously you have a ton to prove, but you haven't proved enough yet to solidify yourself as the guy, right? So Josh Allen looks great, but he wasn't paid, and he knew that if he continued to play great, he was going to be paid. He gets paid, and we've seen this happen. Sometimes when the money hits the bank account, things change. I'm not ready to sit here and make that argument yet. We're freaking 2 weeks in. But these are factors that you can come to the conclusion of, right? I mean, it is a reality. Last year, Josh Allen, he's still fighting for a contract. There's a big difference between a guy fighting for a contract and a guy who is now the second highest paid player or quarterback in the entire league. That's a massive burden to carry around. And that means you have to prove week in and week out that you are deserving of that money. That is a big to-do. And through 2 weeks, perhaps that's just something Josh Allen is going to have to get out of his mind, and it might take some time. Also, I've been seeing this narrative being thrown around all over the place, and I don't have an argument to dispute it. There are fans in the stands. The games in which there are fans in the stands in a full packed house, Josh Allen isn't what Josh Allen was last year. Look, I mean, is it a silly argument? Perhaps, but it's a valid argument because there's really nothing to dispute it. So who knows? There's a variety of different factors here. But I think a lot of, you can take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you can add it up, and that might be what's going on. Also, it could just be a little bit of rust. Who the hell knows? Who knows? I've also seen Lamar Jackson throw multiple picks over the weekend despite getting the victory. I mean, it's not perfection anywhere. Baker Mayfield has looked okay. Nothing dominant early on here. They have the best tandem in the game at the running back position. Yeah, so far, I mean, the best quarterback in the league right now, slap yourself, I'm not lying, it's Derek Carr. I mean, that's where we're at right now in the NFL through 2 weeks. Derek Carr is the best quarterback in the AFC at this given moment. Wow. I mean, what the hell? And then the best quarterback in the NFC right now, I mean, Jesus Christ. Tom Brady, I mean, I've been at a loss of words for Tom Brady for about the last 20 years, yet I continue to lose more words as the years go on. The guy's got 9 TDs through 2 weeks. He'd probably win the MVP right now if the season ended. I mean, good Lord. Good God Almighty. And you hear him last week on a press conference or an interview, whatever the hell it was, a podcast, saying that the possibility of playing till 50 is not being ruled out. I believe it entirely. The guy looks as good today as he did 15 years ago. So that's remarkable to me. And then Kyler Murray as well. Kyler Murray out of the NFC. Kyler Murray right now, he's given MVP type performances the first 2 weeks. He looks extraordinary. But if you look at the AFC right now, I mean, Derek Carr is leading the AFC in passing yards, and he's looked pretty damn good. And they have beaten 2 terrific opponents. Nobody has had a better start to the season than the Las Vegas Raiders, which is wild because, to be honest with you, it felt like this year was a massive, massive year for John Gruden. A huge year with a lot to prove. John Gruden has been pretty borderline bad with the Raiders in his tenure here, and they're off to a great start. So it's been a weird start to the NFL year. I really, truly think that it has. I mean, there's just been a lot of crazy storylines. You have the Chiefs losing in September. That just doesn't happen. You have the Denver Broncos at 2-0. You have the Carolina Panthers with Sam Darnold at 2-0. I mean, what the hell was that? You have the Green Bay Packers with one of the worst losses they've ever had a week ago against the Saints. The Saints follow that up with a horrific loss and look like a completely different team. There's just a million different storylines here. But the one biggest one for me out of the AFC is that every team that you can claim to be a legitimate contender, and we don't know yet if the Raiders are a legitimate contender, but I will say their start's been better than anybody else's. It's going to take some time to really figure that one out. I mean, it's the Raiders. They haven't been there in a very long time. So I'm not going to dive right into that belief just yet. But all 7 playoff teams from last season have slipped up at least once. And typically that's not the way things roll. Typically you have 1 or 2 of those teams who right out of the beginning of the season continue to prove that they are as dominant as they were a season ago. But that's not the case. We have every single team representing the AFC just a season ago with a loss. And then you have the Colts who are 0-2. I was on the Colts bandwagon coming into this year. I thought with the addition of Carson Wentz under Frank Reich, I thought they were going to be a legitimate contender for first place in the AFC. And they are the only AFC playoff game out of the gates to start the year 0-2. So just all over the place, really, in the NFL thus far. So that's why I'm not insanely concerned at this moment. If I had a concern level for the Bills offense from 1 to 10, it'd be sitting probably right around a 2 or a 3 right now. And I think you have 2 great opportunities coming up here against Washington and Houston to get the rust off and really take advantage of 2 weaker opponents before you face off against the cream of the crop in the AFC. So that's going to be big. Before I get to wrapping the show up here, I want to tell you, of course, as I always do, over the last several weeks about our new friends over at NordVPN. They are offering a terrific discount for their VPN service over at thebfvpn.com. Make sure to take advantage of what they're offering. To give you a bit of insight as to what they are offering, here is a quick commercial from bfvpn.com and the folks at NordVPN.
What up, Buffalo Fanatics, Z-Bot, Z here with you live. No, not again. Come on. Man, every time I go live, my internet lags out. What's this? Z-Bot, you got to start using NordVPN for your streams. It will help speed up your internet. 2-year plan is 70% off at the bfvpn.com, and you get your first month free. Kingpin knows best. Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Z-Bot back with you with better than ever internet connection thanks to NordVPN. The best live streams use the best internet connection. That's why the Buffalo Fanatics is proud to be sponsored by NordVPN. Visit thebfpn.com to take advantage of 70% off a 2-year plan with your first month free.
Can't be that, baby. 70% off a month 3. Awesome stuff from the folks over at NordVPN. And we extremely appreciate their support here at the Buffalo Fanatics. So that's the bfvpn.com. Head over there, take advantage of that deal. So let's do some predictions. Heading into this coming week, the Bills, thank you, Y, for the update. The Bills are now 7.5-point favorites against Vegas. That game is back home. The Bills are looking to get their first home win. Back with the fans in the stands, and what better opportunity than this week to get it done? And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think that line is a little heavy, but then again, we just watched the Bills, who are only 3-point favorites this past week, win by 35. So who the hell knows? In week 1 against the Steelers, the Bills were pretty much the exact favorite that they are this week. They were about a touchdown favorite against the Steelers, and that went the other way as well. So we shall see, but I think this game is a terrific opportunity against a defense who's looking to succeed more than they have the first 2 weeks, an offense in the Bills who's looking to succeed more than they have in the first 2 weeks. Which side of the ball is going to prove more? And I really do think that Josh Allen is very aware of what has happened over the last 2 weeks. He knows he hasn't been the man that secured himself a legendary all-time contract. And I think that is going to wind up being a driving force as the games go on here towards him making a resurgence towards the player that we have seen. So looking at this game, I mean, you saw the Giants put up a good amount of points against the Washington D that, like I have mentioned a couple of times here, has not looked like we thought they would look. I have no reason to believe the Bills offense can't do the same. However, that to me is the biggest thing I'm looking for. Two things I'm looking for. I'm looking for the Bills offense, who we just watched Daniel Jones and the Giants put up a decent amount of points against. I'm looking for them to prove they can do the same. And I'm also looking for the Bills defense of last week against Miami to show up against Washington in successive weeks to really have me buying into the fact that this D might be one of the best in the league early on here. So if I have to give a prediction going into this week, I think the Bills wind up taking this one 27-17. I think they wind up covering that line, even though I think it's a bit high. I wouldn't be shocked if they didn't. But I just think the Bills are the superior team. I think that this is the game where I look for the offense to get things rolling a bit more than we have seen thus far. Shouldn't be tough to do. The expectations are high, but the last 2 weeks we have not met those expectations. So a good opportunity to do it here. And I just think the Bills defense, the way they looked this past week, another opportunity against a young quarterback who I do think might be the best quarterback they've faced thus far. Still a young quarterback with very little experience nonetheless. It should be an opportunity for Sean McDermott and this surging defense to have another great outing. So, once again, this is 3 straight weeks where I just don't see an opportunity in my mind for the Bills to lose. And that, of course, is the way I think a lot of us feel after last season. I mean, of course, you're going into the Chiefs game. Right now, I wouldn't pick the Bills to beat the Chiefs. If the game a couple weeks from now against the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football was this week, I would not be picking the Bills. There's just no way. There's no way. The Bills do not look like they are geared up right now on offense to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, but they're certainly geared up to beat the Washington Football Team. They're certainly geared up to beat the Houston Texans. And hopefully those 2 games get them geared up to where a couple weeks from now, I'm saying, okay, I'm back to the confidence level where I think the Bills can get it done against the Kansas City Chiefs. It all starts this week, getting back on pace to what we know the Bills offense is capable of. Let's see if they can get there. This one is wrapping up, and I appreciate you, as always, tuning into the Smoke Break. Always a lot more fun to have you on after a victory, especially a victory like the Buffalo Bills just had. I'll be back here next week, Wednesday night, 8 p.m., as I am each week, and hopefully, once again, we're talking about another dominant victory. But until then, enjoy the rest of the week, enjoy the weekend, enjoy the game, and as always, go Bills.